we are live. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Artful Podcast. And here we are with a new episode. And the last episode was 3 weeks ago, almost 3 weeks ago. And it's been a bit tough lately. I was working on a couple of things. I didn't really have time to make the new episode, and honestly I was just not in the right mindset, but forcing myself try to get out from this negative thinking and just put my stuff out there again, taking the pencil again, start drawing and start painting. I'm doing this series of portrait called Incomplete Portrait, which I kind of mixed the style with abstract and kind of more loose and more expressive with technical, like actual painting. And it's been good going back to the podcast, forcing myself to do the new episode, and it was it was a bit tough, but now much better. I'm working on few things. I apply for a competition which I got selected, and is art exhibition online with the art gallery SW in Bath. So really excited about that. I'm gonna start advertising the exhibition in a couple of days on my Instagram, which is Matteo Lorusso Art, which is the only social media that I use for my art. And so exciting things coming. Hopefully this coronavirus is gonna ease it down a little bit in the next few weeks, so we can go back to have exhibition with gathering people and all these things. But so working on this new series, which has been exciting, different. I forced myself to do something different. I'm working with oil painting on paper this time, which is different than working on canvas. I started doing that when we were in lockdown, so I couldn't get new canvases. I could online, I could get from Amazon or stuff like that, online websites, but I usually like to know the feeling of the canvas, so I usually buy my canvases in a shop, which makes things a little bit difficult if you are in lockdown and nothing is open. So I usually go there to the shop, I feel the canvas, I see the material, try to understand if it's a good canvas with a good price. And usually online you just buy and hoping for the best, which is okay if you don't have nothing special to paint. I don't believe any painting has to be with the highest quality canvas or the highest paper for drawing or the highest material in general. But that's why I started with this series. And even the series before I started, I was doing another series on paper, and I was using acrylic, which I don't I found a little bit. I use it more like a drawing tool than actual painting tool, the acrylic colors. So I was doing a series with mixed media on my IM series, but I was doing a colored version of it. So yeah, I used it before on paper painting, which is, I found it really, I'm actually happy with it. I think I'm gonna start doing a little bit more complex painting on paper, because what I do is basically put a primer on the top of the paper before I start like drawing, and especially before I start painting. So basically it's a gesso primer, so the paper gets thicker, the paint doesn't get through, it doesn't create like holes, and it basically makes the paper thicker. So when you go painting, doesn't damage the surface, and makes everything better. And because the oil paint actually is in the name, has oil in the paint, and usually even with the canvas gets through. That's why most of the canvases are like primed before, because so the oil doesn't get through and it doesn't create that like translucent effect. So that's how I start painting on paper. So we were in lockdown, I couldn't get any canvases, and I had lots of paper left over, and so I start painting on paper, and I actually found it really good, really fun. Sometimes it's even more easier to transport around, because canvases, it's this big square or rectangle, and you have to move it, you have to find spaces, and to collect all this painting on paper, it's much easier to store and to put it away, which is good when you don't live in a giant mansion, giant house. So live in a little apartment, and I found this really convenient. And to be honest, I can sell it for cheaper, so I don't have to skyrocket my prices. And I can sell it for cheaper because it's just on paper, and materials cheaper. It's not in a frame, and you can get framed, but you can sell it unframed. It's really cheap. And something that's what we are gonna talk about today. What makes art valuable? And well, originally my question was the same. My question originally was, what makes art valuable? And when I started doing research that lasted for like a couple of weeks, I couldn't do it faster. My point is, what makes art valuable as in terms as not economically. But when I started researching, the only thing that would come up was how much you can sell a painting for, how much is the most expensive painting in the world, and how you can make your art valuable like in a money wise, which is that's not what I wanted to talk about. Is the last thing I want to talk about when I talk about art. It's money. But I start reading and looking, watching videos and stuff like that, and I found a really interesting couple of points which we're gonna talk about today. And well, let's dive in straight away. What makes art valuable? So why people buy art? Even a bigger question, why they get to the point that if they can, they pay tens of millions of dollars for that art piece, and could be for just a status, social status, could be just a prestige. That's what are we gonna try to look into it today. So first of all, why and what makes art valuable could be the provenance, so where the artworks comes from. So in the artwork's value can be attributed to the provenance. In other words, basically, who has owned the painting in the past. For example, there is this big famous stories of Mark Rothko, which called White Center, which I want to talk about in one of my episodes just about him, because it's really interesting, the whole story behind and why those pieces cost this much. But in this specific painting, the White Center of Rothko was owned by the Rockefeller family, which is one of the most powerful dynasty in America. Rothko masterpiece went from the value of less $10,000 when Rockefeller's family bought it. So they paid the painting only $10,000, and upwards, after they owned the painting, was sold for $72 million. It got to the point that the painting was even called the Rockefeller Rothko. So is something really interesting is going on here. So basically, because a famous person in our society, a famous family in this case, a powerful family in this case, own this painting that didn't cost that much at the beginning, and after years they own it, and when they sold this painting, it got to the point that people wanted to buy it and paid for 72 million. Okay, so that would be an aspect. So where the painting, where the artworks in general, could be a statue, could be anything, where the artwork comes from. So it's quite interesting why the value will skyrocket just because of that. But another factor that can make the artworks expensive or makes more valuable in the eye of the public is the attribution. So the old masterpiece, for example, are sold for like usually one time to the museum, and they never again really get sold. They don't really change them much. Owners, like old masterpiece artworks. So between, it's always like one owner, which is kind of like, it's always private, that sells or gives the painting to the museum or the gallery, and this institution, the museum, keeps the artworks intact, safe, and it just shows to the audience, to the public, and it keeps the painting there. But there is an interesting story about the Peter Paul Rubens Massacre of Innocence, that these pieces, this artwork didn't really make it wasn't really popular. It wasn't famous. It didn't really strike in terms of curiosity by the people. So nobody really wanted the painting and didn't want to pay a lot of money for the painting. But Rubens is considered one of the greatest painters of all time, and it's undeniable that these pieces of art has like technical value. So what makes something else that makes an artwork is technical skills. So if you see an art piece, you see skills, you see composition, colors, all these little things that brings the piece together can make the artwork valuable. And the composition, this painting, the whole thing is just unbelievable. It's so good and it's so intense. There is this scene of people killing kids. It's so cruel. It's just so good. But it wasn't until recently that the Massacre of Innocents was attributed to Rubens, and before that it went largely unnoticed. So not really many people really wanted to spend a lot of money for this artwork, even if like we knew was this good. When it was identified as a Rubens, however, the value of the painting skyrocketed overnight, proving that when the artwork is attributed to a famous artist, people's perception of the artwork change the value, and the value goes up. As we talked about this before, it's really interesting always. This is just another example of when the famous artist made something, and just because he's famous, the artwork cost a lot of money. And I think this painting was sold around something like 60 million or something. Yeah, if I don't remember wrong. A crazy amount of money. At some point it was even the most expensive painting in the world. So yeah, it's just crazy story. What all this story until now are in common, it's auction. That's how usually big paintings are sold, by auction. And this is the other factor that I want to talk about today. Why and what makes the art valuable. One of the big factor is auction. It's not just they put a price on the artwork and somebody pays for it, alright? Which is how it usually works. If I create something, I put a price that I think it's fair for it, and yeah, people buy it. No, auction is really more two people. Scratch that. It's two people egos that beating against each other. So that's what all is really. Why sometimes we found a painting that costs that much is most likely because in the auction there were two people that wanted a painting so badly for whatever reason, because it's the most famous painting right now, is the most famous painting ever, is the artist really popular, or is so it's everyone knows that it's expensive already, so it's something they can buy after, and that's all it is. Sometimes painting go this crazy amount of money they paid for, just because it's two people egos that don't want to give up, and they bet against each other, and they get to the point they spend millions and millions for an artwork, which is okay if they can, obviously, who cares, but you need to dig into a little bit more to understand the behind the scene, the painting, to understand why people want that painting, and usually it's just social status, so people that can show basically their power, and they can show their wealth, and it's just literally that's what it is about. And when people don't understand, when I'm saying you need to dig, if you're interested in this kind of thing and you don't know much about it, you need to dig a little bit to understand, is because when people see these painting prices, and it's like millions and millions of dollars, most of the time is modern art, which makes people be a little bit skeptical about it, because most of the time you're like, oh, it's just a paint of color, it's just one color, usually just one red or black square, or white dot in the middle, or these quite crazy paintings that you see they get sold for like millions of dollars. And when like a common person, like people like just they're not that interested in art and they don't know what's going on, see that and they see, okay, that's the art that is more expensive, and usually expensive is correlate to quality, and because usually you pay more to get better things. So if I want to get a good watch, I don't get the watch that costs $10, I get the watch that costs $200 or $10,000. So that's that sort of thing. So people sees that and say and think that, okay, that's the art that costs more, and that's the art that's the best art basically. And painting that costs 10 millions doesn't make the art good, it makes the artist expensive, which is completely different thing. It's a completely different game, and it's all because of auction. It's the system how they sell these paintings. I'm not saying auction are bad, because I think that's the fair way, is the only fair way you can actually sell a masterpiece that anyone wants. You can't really put a price on it, so people fight for it, and they decide between them the fair price between the two. Unfortunately, all the only people that can pay for these pieces, it's millionaires, billionaires that most of the time are unknown, and we don't even know where the painting goes. And it is one of the fairest, unfortunately, one of the fairest system, like way of selling these pieces. Another factor that makes an art an artwork valuable, it's the historical significance. So quite easy to understand, basically. It is, but even here it's quite interesting. Understand what's going on. So firstly, you can basically consider the piece in terms of importance to art history. And for example, a painting by Picasso, Monet, Pollock, it's worth more than all the recent artists' work, because since those painters made art, they changed the canon of art history and the whole art movement. So this will be the historical significance, first of all. So having an important artist, an amazing artist that changed the whole movement, because he made those paintings and they were so good, so for whatever reason changed the whole game. And another aspect of the historical significance is, for example, there is this curious stories about one of the Gustav Klimt painting. When Russia was the Soviet Union and operate under communism, people were not allowed to own private property. They didn't have even a bank account. When the communist regime fell apart, they were newly allowed to own property and to have their own things, and they were looking to art as a way to take advantage of this opportunity. So they were spending money in the art industry. And the painting made by the Austrian painter Gustav Klimt was stolen by the Nazis during the World War II. After going through a few legal hoops, it was eventually returned to a descendant of its original owner before it was sold at an auction. Due to the interesting story and historical significance of on a global scale, really, I think the painting was called Adele Blocker the second, I think, if I said it right, become the fourth highest prices painting of its time, and was sold for 88 million. And because of the story, basically, not only the historical significance as who made the painting and what the painter did for the art history, was the historical significance of the painting himself. So if the painting had a significant history behind, it will get more expensive, as the Gustav Klimt painting, where apparently it cost 88 million in the end. Crazy. And at last, the obvious one, it's the obvious factor of the painting is the social status. Why the painting gets to the point that costs millions of dollars? It's the social status. It's the way of people showing off, basically. And they were showing off, and they were showing off to their peers, their all the billionaires that comes over to their house, and that's quite self-explanatory. People buy expensive things to have to show to people that they can buy expensive things. The interesting thing with paintings and art in general, that most of the time the buyer is anonymous, so the public doesn't really know who bought the painting, but obviously the people that they wanna know, they're gonna know. So their peers and their friends, and they can showing off to the people they want to. They bought these artworks for millions of dollars. And in the end, another factor that makes art valuable are obvious things, but they're worth a mention. It's the authenticity of the artwork. Authenticity is a clear indicator of value of the artworks, and the condition of the artwork as well is another obvious indicator of why some like artworks in general cost this much. If it's in good condition, costs more than obviously if it's in bad condition. The medium of the artwork can be another factor why the artworks cost a lot. If I made something on paper, it will cost less if it's made on canvas, and the canvas will cost less if it's made on gold. I don't know, but you get the point, and it makes sense. I used expensive material to make these artworks, and you pay me even more to buy it because it's made with expensive materials. And sometimes it's a combine of this all thing. Sometimes it's just condition, historical value, the authenticity of the artwork, and can be the combination of this. And what makes in the end art valuable, behind the cost of supplies and labor, we might never truly understand. And with this, guys, we finished. We are back. Hopefully next week we'll come out with a new episode, and I'm happy to be back. I'm quite excited to coming back and do again this podcast. It's just I wasn't in a good mood. I kind of work like that. If I'm not in a good mood, I don't really I can make things that I love, and I really like doing this. I like doing art, so it will all be connected. So anyway, thank you very much for listening. Obviously subscribe, follow the channel with just clicking that button, and thank you very much. From the ARTFUL Podcast, I'm out.